Packers fans, welcome into the Green 19 podcast from JS Online and PackersNews.com. I'm Kassidy Hill, joined as always by Tom Silverstein and Ryan Wood. You can see Ryan and I are sitting right here together. We are at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, the ATL, where, guys, the Packers are now 1-1 after falling to the Falcons 25-24. If that's all you knew about this game, that they lost to the Falcons in week 2, still a fairly new team, and especially without Aaron Jones, without Christian Watson, without David Bakhtiari, and much of the game without Elgton Jenkins, that in and of itself wouldn't be a surprise. But as we know, they had a 12-point lead in the fourth quarter and then lost 25-24. Ryan, I'm going to start with you. Just your overall impressions of this game and the team's response from what we saw when we spoke to them in the locker room.
Well, first of all, my computer internet is more broke than the Packers defense, and that's saying something. So thank you for letting me join you. This was a reminder to me that this season, and certainly this game, but this season as a whole was really evaluated on dual tracks. There's the day-to-day, week-to-week track of the 2023 season, but simultaneously what makes this season unique is that they're playing these games for 2024, 2025, as much as they're playing them for 2023. So in the Sunday afternoon prism, what happened now, it's a tough loss. You have a 12-point lead in the fourth quarter. Matt LaFleur was not happy after this game. You can understand why. You got to close the door. It's a lot easier to close the door when you have a team that actually knows how to win. This is the youngest team in the NFL. There's so many rookies. It's stunning. When I walked into the locker room after the game, you can see from time to time players huddled around each other at the lockers, going over plays, going over what happened in the game. That's not uncommon, but it was like every position, everywhere throughout the locker room, where they were talking about what just happened. They were giving lessons. It was more of a classroom than a locker room because this is the youngest team in the NFL. I think in the long view, there's a lot to like. There's a lot of potential. There's a lot of talent on this offense especially. It's just so stinking young. They're going to have to lose before they win. They're going to have to learn from these losses.
And there's a lot we can get into when it comes to winning and losing, and especially in relative to today. One of the things that Rasul Douglas told you and I when we were standing there and a few other reporters after the game was, I don't know how we got here, talking about the fourth quarter. I don't know how we got here. And I think a lot of the guys were probably asking themselves that same thing because, as I said, the Packers have a 12-point lead, and then you look up and they've lost the game by 1. How did they get there?
I would say they never learned to defend wide zone running plays. The Falcons just continually went outside with this zone run. And what they did was they took Kenny Clark and Devontae Walker and Evan Wyatt and TJ Slayton and Brooks and Wooden, and they just took them out of the game. Because early on they were killing the Falcons' offensive line, and they just went to their classic, which is what they do well, is their classic wide zone, which forces everybody to go wide. Forces the defense to go lateral, and I think they didn't figure out a way to stop it, and I also think they just got worn down. I'm not sure you should get worn down in the second game of the season, but 78 plays. They played 70 last week. Maybe they just ran out of gas. And they just missed on a couple of plays that would have made the difference in an ugly win instead of an ugly loss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, missed on a couple of plays. Jair Alexander, Quay Walker both dropped interceptions. The Jair Alexander dropped interception. I mean, guys, I think it's safe to say that would have been a house call if he had been able.
Maybe. I saw Tyler Allgeier was there. Might have stopped him. But either way, it would have set the Packers up a little better than they were. I think they wound up with a field goal because it was fourth down. So I don't know if that would have been a huge factor. Quay Walker's could have been a big factor because he might have returned that one for a touchdown.
As we've seen, he could too.
I'm with you. I think that Jair Alexander would have outran Algiers because boy, he can run, but we'll never know because he dropped it.
Right.
Quay Walker had a chance, and he dropped it. Those are games that you have to – those are plays you got to make to win games. You have to catch the ball when it's thrown at you.
Yeah. Speaking of the wide zone, let's just start there. We're going to start in the fourth quarter and work our way back, basically. As you said, they just started to get exhausted towards the end, but again, it's only week 2. That wide zone, or let me back up, kind of covering the edges and the DBs covering the edges and tackling there, that's what won them the game last week in Chicago. And it's what killed them today. For as much as they talked all offseason about wanting to be an aggressive defense, and I feel like we saw that last week, did they lose that today? Did this feel in a little bit like same old defense that this was towards, this time last year? Or did you see still enough changes that you think, okay, they just happened to run into a wood chipper of a running game with Bijan Robinson, Tyler Allgeier? Sorry.
Well, it does feel like last year. It feels a lot like last year. Like, this is supposed to be the defense that can, turn the tide in a game. It can nullify a run game or, get after a quarterback. And instead, it was just the opposite. And it ended like so many games in 2022. It felt exactly the same. The difference probably was that only 2 guys had to make tackles, or combined for 31 tackles. And usually the Packers teams were running it right up their gut. And this time they just kept running it to the perimeter and forcing their inside linebackers to make all the tackles.
Ryan, there was one play in particular that felt like deja vu from last year. It was 3rd and 3. The Falcons had 3rd and 3. I think they were on the Green Bay side of the field, but not deep. And they sent Bijan Robinson flexed out to the right, and Devondre Campbell was lined up on him and 10 yards off. There's 2 different points I think you could pick at there. And Falcons did exactly what you would expect them to do. They took an inside slant to Bijan Robinson, easy pickup. We talk about the youth on this team, but on defense, this is not a young defense. So what is it that maybe are we just not seeing something that should be happening, or making a bigger deal out of some of these personnel groupings than there are? Or do you just kind of look at that and go, what is Joe Barry getting at here?
I think that what feels exactly the same to last year is Joe Barry, again, being completely unable to adjust and take something away that's killing him in the middle of the game. In-game adjustments. Saw it last year. The opener last year, right? Mm-hmm. Justin Jefferson, all 4 quarters, ran rough shot, completely wide open in the Packers secondary. He never adjusted in the middle of the game. It was obvious from the first drive or 2 of this game. And to me, what is different than the past, this is a salty defense when it comes to – they got a nasty pass rush. They can get after the quarterback, which is important in this league. And you can't just line up and run it at them, because that defensive line is pretty good too. The middle of the field is very much not open for business. But it was obvious from the very beginning of the game, the Falcons knew that, and they weren't going to mess with the middle of the field. They were just going to continue to stretch this defense sideline to sideline, take the underneath, short, horizontal stuff, and they couldn't stop it all game. It's another example of Joe Barry being unable to make an in-game adjustment. It never changed. From first quarter, first drive to the end, it was the same thing over and over again.
Let's talk about some guys that are on the field, though. We talked so much, where we gave positive coverage to Darnell Savage last week for his 10 tackles, although I think that later in the week they took a tackle away from him. So his 9 tackles versus Chicago, and he didn't really get the ball thrown towards him much because they were going to stay on the ground. He got the ball thrown towards him today. He gave up a few big plays, including one huge one that put the Falcons down into the red zone. I believe it was like a 45-yard shot to the wide receiver, Hollins. It was a 50-50 ball. Darnell Savage was in a good position to play good defense and didn't get his hand up in there. I'd like to go back and watch it. And then a couple of plays later, Desmond Ridder runs it in for a touchdown. And that's what really started the comeback for the Falcons. Rudy Ford, again, didn't necessarily redeem himself today from last week. Jonathan Owens only really got into the stat book on special teams when he had a great tackle that got negated because of a face mask. Ryan, you said before the season, safety isn't the biggest need because they're not a safety away from the Super Bowl. That makes sense. But are they a safety? Are the safeties lending into this loss today and possibly could that hurt them again in the future? I guess is my question.
And I think we all knew as soon as the draft was over and they didn't draft a safety that was going to be a problem, and it's still a problem. I don't think it's necessarily why they lost today. I think they lost today because they couldn't stop an outside zone to save their lives. I'd push back on Darnell Savage being in position to make a play on that deep shot. He had about 15, 20 yards of ground to make up with the ball basically in the air. He bit hard on the action fake. Was that a flea flicker? Am I imagining that?
So. I don't believe so. Spoon, do you remember it being a flea flicker?
No, but
it was an action fake on the play. I couldn't remember.
Was that the flea flicker? I don't know. There were so many flea flickers.
Yeah,
but there were two, but
there was action fake, and he had a lot of ground to make up. That's no way to win a jump balls when you got to run 20 yards before it. As a whole, Darnell Savage didn't play as good as last week. He played better than probably a lot of games he played last season. That's a very low bar. I don't think safety was the biggest problem today. I think the fact that they could not stop take away the perimeter of the field for anything. That's over and over again.
Spoon, let's talk about Bijan Robinson for a second here. He ended with over 200 yards, I believe, total. He had 124 on the ground and then 48. Oh, well, that's not 200. That's I can't do math. 124 plus 48. This is 132. 172. 172. Yeah. I did it.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
That's such a simple addition problem. 172 yards. Still pretty dang good day for one individual player. Is he one of those guys that's just going to get his and it's a matter of trying to stymie the blood flow, or was that more again of them going to that wide zone and there not being anything to stop it? I guess my question is, was it offense or was it X's and O's or Jimmy's and Joe's here when it comes to Bijan Robinson?
Well, he's a heck of a player. I mean, he is a terrific player. There's a reason he was picked 8th in the draft. I think teams are, especially the early teams that have to face him, are going to struggle as Arthur Smith finds different ways to use him, different plays. I mean, sometimes those outside zones were big cutbacks where they get everybody going, and then it was really kind of like a counter play. Like you said, they matched him up, lined him up as a wide receiver. The Packers would have loved to treated him like a wide receiver and played a defensive back, but then the Falcons could have just run the ball because he's 215 pounds. So he's an unusual guy, and he's going to be a phenomenal player. I think they got caught, on a guy who had a really big day, and they just didn't figure out a way how to slow him down. I also think, it wasn't a good day for the defense, but I think the game could have gone differently if the offense had been more productive. They needed to get some long drives and get this, get the defense off the field. It was not a good day for the defense. And I thought the offense just, it needed to score more points today, and they couldn't do it. So it was kind of one of those games where sometimes the offense has to pick up the defense, and that was what had to happen today, and it didn't.
I think 2 points to that. One, it wasn't just the yardage to me that was an issue. Bijan Robinson's going to get his. It was how easy it was, especially at the end. The Falcons had the goal down 24-22 to go for 4th and short instead of having a chip shot field goal with 3 minutes left in the game. that is as disrespectful as you can possibly be to another defense. And they didn't even run it up the gut because they can't run it up the gut against the Packers. Interior is pretty good. They just pitched it out to him on 4th and short. Here, Bijan Robinson, they can't tackle you. Do something with it, and he did. That's you got to take that personal. The other point I forget because what's the last thing that's been said?
Oh, about the offense.
Yeah. The other point is, and I agree, that's a lot of plays. The difference is, you look down the stretch of this game, the Packers offense finishes 3 and out, 4 and out.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't score a touchdown the last 16 minutes. They no-showed the fourth quarter. The offense let them down too. The difference to me is that we expected that from a young offense full of nothing but rookies, basically, especially without Aaron Jones on the field, Christian Watson on the field. They had Quay Walker on defense. They had their players. And this is a defense that's expected with this young offense with a new starting quarterback to hold the water. Their failure was much greater to me than the offense's because this is what you expect from them. Defense has got to win that game. They got to make stops, and they didn't come close. 4th and short, chip shot field goal down 2 points. The Falcons are pitching it to their running back and saying, the game's over if they make a stop there.
Yeah. That being said, let's flip to the other side on the offense. They answered 2 of the Falcons' scoring drives in the 4th, a touchdown drive and a field goal drive with 3 and outs. And then, as you said, towards the end there, went 4 and out. Did they even gain a yard on that drive? Maybe a couple, but not much there at all. Through 3 quarters, the offense actually looked pretty good, and it was being led by nothing but rookies and second-year players, and A.J. Dillon some. But we'll get into the running game here in just a little bit. Let's start with Jordan Love. As you said, this is kind of what you expect a young offense to do. So, Spoon, if you're looking at this from the 30,000 point view, the critical view, with Jordan Love in his 3rd start, are you focusing more on the first 3 quarters or the 4th quarter?
Well, I like to judge. I think a 2-minute warning or 2-minute drills define quarterbacks. I think great quarterbacks excel in the 2-minute offense. And, he got some heat on there and had to make, a little bit off balance throws. But, he had Romeo Doubs open and he missed them. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of play he's got to make. He looked very poised today. He looked like he knew where he was going with the ball. I just think when, it's gut check time and you got to kind of improvise a little bit, those are the plays you got to make. And I'm not sure that he can make those yet. That's to be seen. I think the potential is definitely there. I thought he played within LaFleur's system really well, but then there's going to be times you have to play outside of the system, and to me, that's what kind of determines whether you're going to be a great quarterback. So that's kind of how I saw it.
Ryan?
I couldn't agree more. I thought, Matt LaFleur's post-game press conference, he was not saying a lot. The only time he really said anything that would be considered glowing was when he talked about Jordan Love's play. They don't have Aaron Jones, Christian Watson, David Bakhtiari. They don't have Elgton Jenkins for half a game. And they scored 24 points on the road. And I don't know how good the Falcons' defense is, but I know this is a really young offense without its best players, and it scored 24 points. It's pretty good. Now, ultimately, these are games that if Jordan Love's going to reach his full potential, these are games he's going to have to win. He's going to have to learn how to win these games. I don't expect him to in his 3rd NFL start, his 2nd one as a full-time starter. This is the question, and it's in the micro level. You make a mistake on the field, you miss an assignment. Do you repeat the mistake? Do you learn from it, or do you repeat the mistake? Don't make the same mistake twice. Is this something he learns from? Is it not something he learns from? We'll find out over the longer view if he develops in these clutch moments, and he has this catalog of experience that he can lean on, or if this is who he is. We don't know that yet. But, yeah, there's a lot of potential there. There's a lot of potential in the receiving game. His 3 touchdowns today were all to rookies. Mm-hmm. That's pretty good. In the long view, I think there's a lot to be excited for if you're a Packers fan with where this offense might go.
Let's talk about some of those rookies here for a second. Jayden Reed, we've known through camp, if he can be out there, he can be a game changer. We saw him on a jet sweep touchdown that, I'll be honest, guys, I didn't think he had it because I didn't think he had enough room. I don't know where he found that room or where he found that edge. And that may have just been pure speed. And then his touchdown later in the third quarter he was wide open because he just peeled straight off of his guy. It was a 10-yard touchdown. He made it look easy because it was easy. But it was easy because of what he did before the ball even got to him. All of that being said, and then you have Tay Wicks as well. And I think that's really kind of what I'm getting to here is Jayden Reed, we knew he could probably be this. It may be happening a little bit earlier than I'm expecting. Will he plateau at all as people get more tape on him? Tay Wicks, for various reasons, injuries and whatnot, I feel like we haven't seen as much from him. Do you walk away, if you're Matt LaFleur, from today going, okay, let's maybe try to get him the ball a little bit more? And maybe he's been doing that in practice that we haven't seen because he was out there a lot today. I'm curious what his snap count was, actually. Spoon, all that to say, what were your impressions of Tay Wicks?
I thought they showed once again, they showed a lot of trust in him. And, he came through with them. The touchdown was sensational. I don't think that means that when Christian Watson comes back, it's going to take any snaps from him. I think this is good experience for him. I think it'll be Watson, Dobbs, and Reed primarily once Watson gets back. And, they'll use that predominantly, but it's probably good for Matt LaFleur to know he's got a rookie who's got a lot of talent. I was always surprised that they used him so much in the Bears game because he hardly played and, because of injury at the end of training camp. But they see something there. I don't know how much more snaps he can get, but especially when Watson comes back. But he's, a nice card to hold in your back pocket.
Mm-hmm. Let's flip to the inside here a little bit. There was a point in the game, I think in really the third quarter, where you just kind of start realizing, you're doing the clock math. You're looking at what the Falcons offense has sort of figured out. And you're going, if the Packers want to keep this ball out of Bijan Robinson and Tyler Allgeier's hands, they're going to have to milk clock as well. Should you not be able to do that with A.J. Dillon on the field? And I'm trying to remember what his final stats were today. Let's see. He finished with 15 rushes for 55 yards. He averaged 3.7 yard per carry, and his long was 8 yards. Guys, I know part of the allure of A.J. Dillon is that he could be a good cold weather back, but shouldn't you be able to hand that to him in the third quarter and start milking clock as well?
He looks like an okay backup running back right now. There is no 1A, 1B agreement.
Right.
That's a facade. He is a backup running back. And I think in a number 2 role, he can be okay. But he's not a workhorse. He's not Aaron Jones. He's not who's going to break a game wide open for you. And you're right. Late in the game, he had plenty of carries today. And that's the time where he should, if he's a workhorse running back, he should be at his best. The defense should be worn down. And they couldn't get a first down with him. 3 straight carries. So, no, he's a number 2, and that's going to determine his market value if it stays this way throughout the season going forward when he hits free agency.
Spoon, are we being reactive in week 2?
Yeah, I think so. He has not looked impressive. I mean, there's no zip to him right now. He's I don't know if he's slow reading stuff or he's not picking his feet up. I don't know what the deal is, but right now he's not a lead back by any means. So I think, it's yet to be seen what he's going to be. And either, they have to figure out what he does best. And I know he's always been better when the quarterback is under center. But, they like to use the shotgun. So I don't know if they're going to have to, pick out plays that are better for him and use those more often, but they got to get something out of them.
I don't know where the open field runs that we saw his first season went. I mean, that game that he outrushed Derrick Henry the first time he went up against Derrick Henry. He had runs where he would get downfield 10, 15 yards, break a tackle, get into the end zone. The only reason I don't think we're being reactive is because what we see through 2 games is what we've seen last year. It hasn't changed, and until it changes, I'll react then. But it hasn't changed. It's the same as last year, and I don't know where that burst he had early in his career went.
And then let's also look. I want to see Emmanuel Wilson had 3 carries for 5 yards. Okay, so not quite the impact that we, or at least I, thought he would have with Aaron Jones out. Also his first NFL action, so not going to read too much there into that. Looking at the line, I'll be honest, I don't really watch the line that closely during games. My attention is kind of everywhere else. That's more in a rewatch. But I know sometimes y'all watch them a little bit closer. With David Bakhtiari and Elgton Jenkins out, what did you see from the left side of that line? Spoon?
I thought Rasheed Walker struggled early on. Like, it was, I don't know if the nerves or just facing who he was facing, Bud Dupree and Calais Campbell over there. I think he struggled early on, but I thought he kind of got his footing a little bit later as the game wore on. They had to give him some help. They brought in Yash Nyman a couple times to run like a jumbo off of his side. I don't think he was the reason they lost. I think he was partially the reason they struggled in the early going. I think once he got his feet under him, he was better. It wasn't the same as having Bakhtiari, but, they still could win the game with him. And I didn't see Royce Newman giving up anything. Like you said, you have to go back and watch it more closely. But the times that I was watching the offensive line, I thought Royce Newman did a pretty good job. Now, maybe I'm wrong, and we'll see differently. But I don't remember Jordan Love being, just decimated or having to blast out of the pocket down after down.
I agree with you, Spoon. And again, same caveat. I didn't watch every snap Royce Newman took, but I didn't see him giving up much either. I was pretty surprised how well he played.
I feel like we were in a dome. Special teams was going to be fine. There wasn't too much to do. Keyshawn Nixon at one point did bring a kickoff from the 9 yards deep in the end zone.
After tiptoeing the back end of the boundary of the back of the end zone. I've never seen that.
I feel like if it went into the tunnel and he could somehow catch it, he would bring it out. But there's nothing really there to talk about too much. But something
one thing about that, the irony of that was if that ball had been kicked to 2 yards deep instead of 9 yards deep, he would add a huge return. There was a gaping hole in Atlanta's kickoff coverage, but he was so deep, he was too late to it. He didn't get a chance to get it. It started to close as he started to come forward. But if he's on the 2, I don't know. I don't know if he'd score, but there was one hellacious hole for him to run through.
I feel like they're, at least through 2 weeks, he's getting kicked away from a little bit too.
Yeah, they're trying to put it over his head and deep. And now they might kick for the corners if they know he's going to return from 9 yards out.
Do you put a second person back there to force them to kick to one or the other? You put Jaden Reed back there with him? No. But in the scheme of special teams, I want to ask this question. The Packers' very first drive, they had what would have been, I'm trying to think, it would have been like a 55-yard field goal, and then they got a flag. So I think that would have made it I may be remembering.
I think it was 52, and then it would have made it a 57-yard field goal. Does that sound right?
I know there was a 7 in there somewhere, so yes, that sounds right. And Matt LaFleur elected to punt it. That's 3 points in a one-score game, and I know that's a 57-yard field goal, so it's not a guaranteed 3 points. But from what we've seen of Anders Carlson's leg, and again, in a dome, do you question that decision?
I think Matt LaFleur came into this game thinking that he had a better defense than what played out there today. Early in the game, I do the same thing. I kick it deep, make Desmond Ridder go the full field and beat you. So late in the game, sure. If it's a game-winning field goal, they'll kick it from 56. But not early in the game like that, setting that kind of tone. And I think he kind of played to what he thought his strength would be, which is the defense against the Falcons offense.
I watched Carlson warm up before the game, and I always like to see where they're going to kick from. And a lot of times they're testing to see how far they can kick from, what their limit is. And he stopped at 53 yards. Now, I don't know if that was the limit. It looked like it. The kick I saw, he made it, didn't go over by much. So I don't know. You know, a lot of times they pick a yard line, and the coach says, where can you hit it from? You know, and the only time they try those 60-yarders is when the game's on the line. And so I think he figured, okay, well, I don't know if 58's on his radar, and I don't want to give Atlanta the ball on the 38-yard line with, you know, really good field position. So I think that was his thought process. I don't think he was thinking it was going to be a one-score game.
Right. And that's one of those things where it's just like hindsight's 20/20, and, you know, it was the very first drive of the game, but can't help but wonder in a one-score game what that might have done. I'm trying to think of what else we haven't covered yet. Why do I feel like we've covered everything and we've only talked for half an hour?
We've covered everything.
Spoon, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? I was just going to go into, like, you know, knowing how to lose, but, like, specifically, like, game-wise, personnel-wise.
I'm looking and seeing if there's anything that strikes me. Not really. I think we covered a lot.
Did too. Okay, let's land this plane. Guys, the Packers now go back home. They will have their home opener in Lambeau next week versus the New Orleans Saints, and the next short week versus the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions, who lost in overtime today, versus the Seattle Seahawks. NFC North currently looks like Packers and Lions both 1-1, Vikings and Bears both 0-2. As we've said, this is a young team, at least on the offense. I've always heard that one of the toughest things for guys coming from college to the NFL, one, smaller stadiums, but two, learning how to lose. Is this one of those weeks where, obviously, if you're, you know, the Packers or any team, you always want to win, but could this pay off in the long run, so to speak, Ryan?
You know, I entered this season thinking it's going to be the same as 2008. 2008, Aaron Rodgers, the Packers as a whole, it was about the future. They weren't evaluated on the fact they went 6-10 that season. It was they got a quarterback, they got a future. It's only 2 games. I don't know yet if that's the case. But when I look at, first of all, Brian Gutekunst might have gotten himself a draft class. Lucas Van Ness has a batted pass
another good game today,
nullified because of a penalty. And the next play, very next snap, he has a tackle for loss. Luke Musgrave, 17 yards on 3rd and 1. Nobody covers him. He's continued to be a threat in the offense. Jaden Reed, first 2 career touchdowns. Dontavian Wicks, first career touchdown. These are all rookies. The it's not so much whether they win or lose these games. They count. I get it. They want to see how far 2023 can be. It's about whether or not they have a future. And they failed their first close test, but there's going to be more. These are things that they're going to have to learn and then put them into action. If they can do that, 2023 might be a solid year. If not, it'll be like 2008. But there's a lot of talent on the field, so I think that kind of nullifies. If this was the past couple of years, this would be a crushing defeat. But this is just a different year.
Spoon?
Yeah, it's a long season, 17 games. I thought they were going to lose this game. I just, Atlanta, it's its second straight home game. They couldn't lose at home again. I mean, there's some people who are picking them to be the division champs. So there was a lot of pressure on them to come out and win the game. And the NFL is so crazy. I don't know. I still think the Packers are a good team. I still think they're a likely playoff team. Mm-hmm. I just think that today they let one get away. And, for whatever happens, they have to just put it behind them and then move on to what's going to be, a pretty tough 10 days. Which, playing New Orleans and then facing Detroit. So I think this game, we'll look back later and say, well, it was just a game they should have won and their record would be better. But I don't know if it's going to sink them. It was close enough that I don't think it's just going to devastate them. I think they'll be on to the next game on Monday.
Mm-hmm. And I looked this up earlier for my story. After 2 weeks in a row with Justin Fields and Desmond Ridder, who they said, that small little side note, they said Ridder ran more than they thought he would because he ran so little last week. He had one rush for -1 yard in week 1. But wasn't that Ridder's draft profile? Is that, he wasn't a legit dual threat, but he was a dual threat, he was a threatening dual threat. So I was a little surprised to hear Quay Walker say that. And
he has not run much in the NFL. He's I think he's played. This was his sixth game. Fifth game.
Sixth.
And he's run 6. Okay, and he had run 17 times in the previous 5 games. So I don't think he's known as a runner, or at least in his NFL ability. I don't think that's been any part of his game. And I thought they did use him today more than probably what anybody thought.
Yeah. That being said, 2 weeks in a row with Justin Fields and Desmond Ridder, they get to face Derek Carr next week, which might feel like a slight reprieve. I looked up his numbers over the course of his career. He averages 5.4 rushing yards a game. So maybe a little bit of a breath there. But we will remain to be seen. We are going to pack up here in Atlanta, get on a jet plane and come home. And then we will have Matt LaFleur Monday afternoon, followed by the Packers getting ready for week 3 versus the New Orleans Saints. Guys, any final 20 – I'm giving you 20 seconds because I'm hungry. Any final 20-second thoughts?
No, not really.
Spoon, I can always count on you. Ryan?
I have said all I have to say.
I'm loving this. I'm going to go find me some Waffle House. Guys, thank you so much. This has been the Green 19 podcast from JS Online and PackersNews.com.